morning, and thank you for tuning in to the Andrew Tate Show, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. We've got a great show for you guys today. We're going to be covering the ACC filing a countersuit against Clemson, Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler to return to the UFC. Also, we will touch on the UFC antitrust settlement. Then we will discuss France plan to start Wembanyama, Embiid, and Gobert for the 2024 Olympics. And then, as always, at the end of the show, we'll be diving into the oddities of the day. Before we start, I'd like to ask that you guys like and follow the show. Also, we get a number of questions from viewers that come in during the show, so to ensure that your question gets read on the air, I ask that you use the tips and donation link with your question. The tips and donation link is GSMCpodcast.net. This puts your question at the top of the list so that I can see it, and it also just really helps the show. Woo!
Only thing I was going to correct on your intro is that Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler are returning to the ring. They're not returning to the UFC. They've always been in the UFC. That's the only thing I would change.
Excuse me. Sorry.
Other than that, flawless as usual, even though the start of our day is not flawless.
Rough morning, guys.
Today is brought to you by technical issues.
Yes.
First, Faith jumps on, and she's having all kind of issues with her computer. We finally fix Faith's issues, then yours truly start having all kind of issues with his computer. Therefore, we're starting off a little later and a little rougher than normal.
We're making up for Monday because we didn't have any technical issues on Monday, and I feel like Monday is always our day to have an issue, and Monday went swimmingly, so we're making up for it today, I feel like.
Yes. So we didn't even have, we normally have a little conversation before where I was joking with Faith about the fact that she knows more about college football than most people on her campus would know. Because of all the crazy drama that goes on. And then the football gods just froze her camera up and would not let her respond to me whatsoever about that.
I've been having some issues with the Wi-Fi because the Wi-Fi went in and out yesterday too. After the show. It was after the show, thank goodness. But so I had to
Are you guys having crazy weather? Is it anything like that?
No. It's the company that we do it through, and I think eventually we're going to move away from that company.
We're not going to say any company's names on air unless they're cutting us a check. They don't get their name on air.
I'm not going to name drop them, but I think eventually we will switch to another company for Wi-Fi.
Wow.
So,
and yesterday when we were doing the show, I have a giant window in front here that my walls are glass, so I can see through our office all the way to outside. And we don't live that far from the beach. We don't work that far from the beach. So the ocean is 100 yards away. So when we were doing our show, I kept eyeing over there, and it was sun was beaming. People were in swimsuits and everything. And I'm like, ooh, it's going to be a nice day to go outside and get me some sun yesterday. The minute that we ended our show, and I'm like, oh, I'm going outside. Clouds came in, the wind came in off the ocean. It was dark, and it's been dark and gloomy the rest of the day, and it's dark and gloomy today. All I've been wanting was a little bit of sun. Instead, it's freezing. It's freezing here. For me, it's freezing. It's 61 today and gloomy. I need my sun, or I'm not the same perky guy.
Yeah.
All right. What about you guys? Georgia, what's the weather? You probably are warmer than we are right now.
Yesterday was actually a lovely day. Today, you never know with Georgia. Georgia likes to pick and choose how it feels that day. Because a couple weeks ago, the weather was absolutely beautiful. It was in the 70s and 80s with like a slight breeze. It was wonderful. And then it rained, and then it was really gloomy and cold all last week. And now I think it's starting to warm up again. But the lovely pollen is dropping, so...
I don't miss the allergies.
Season.
I do not miss all the allergies that go on in the U.S., man. That one, that would kick your butt. I do. You don't get it. Like, there's a little bit of that. You have a little bit of allergies, but nothing like I did in the U.S. It's crazy.
Pollen's awful. Hate it.
It's a necessary part of life, though.
Yes.
And the ecosystem, it's kind of important. Plants need to be pollinated, but not our noses.
Yes, I agree.
So we're on the same page. All right. What do you have for me today, Ms.
Alrighty, guys. New stuff has dropped in the divorce court of the ACC and Clemson, and I guess FSU, but this is more about Clemson. So yesterday we talked about how Clemson filed a lawsuit against the ACC for grant of rights, and now the ACC has filed a countersuit against Clemson. So after Clemson filed a lawsuit against the ACC calling into question the conference grant of rights and exit fees, the ACC is fighting back. Per The Athletic, the ACC has filed a countersuit against Clemson in a North Carolina court. In its lawsuit filed in the Court of Common Pleas in Pickens County, South Carolina on Tuesday, Clemson called the ACC's withdrawal penalties unconscionable and unenforceable per ESPN's Pete Thamel. The conference also believes its grant of rights would allow it to continue to own Clemson's media's rights even after it leaves, which the university called a nonsensical reading, wrong, and inconsistent with the plain language of that agreement. However, the ACC is arguing that Clemson took part in and voted for the increase in the exit fee, which Thamel noted was cast as $572 million in Florida State's lawsuit against the conference. The ACC is also countersuing Florida State over the same issues. The ACC also contended that Clemson originally sought to work with the conference and avoid going to court in the wake of Florida State's lawsuit. While it is indicated that the ACC a desire to engage in productive conversations, it was actually finalizing it and preparing its lawsuit, seeking to file first in South Carolina, the lawsuit reads. So, I mean...
Go ahead. You want to go first? Go ahead.
ACC's just not backing down, man. They got...
I don't blame them. They have no choice.
Yeah. 4 different lawsuits, though, in 3 states. 3 separate states.
I find, first off, the ACC had to file that countersuit. I understand why they filed the countersuit. Mm-hmm. As I learn more about this whole situation, first off, the ACC has to do their countersuit because they're trying to keep the ACC together.
Right.
They don't want to blow up like the Pac-12. Mm-hmm. So the only way to prevent from getting stomped on is to fight back. Mm-hmm. That's the key. But I find it fascinating that Clemson is taking a totally different approach than Florida State. They're not joining Florida State's lawsuit. They're like, oh no, we got a whole different conversation going over. Florida State is saying, listen, we signed this grant of rights, but the old commissioner wasn't negotiating in good faith. He was more concerned about taking care of his son and other things instead of what's best for the schools. Mm-hmm. And because of that, we should be allowed out of our granted rights. That's kind of the core gist of what Florida State is saying. Mm-hmm. Clemson, I don't quite know what their thought process is on this one. They're saying that, hey, yeah, we have a granted rights, But if we decide to leave, then this contract is just for if we're in the ACC. If we decide to leave, then there's no more rights to be granted. And so we have the right to leave whenever we want to. No one on the planet has looked at the granted rights in that way. It is saying that this contract is strictly for if we're in the ACC and our ESPN contract, but if we decide to leave, then we can leave without having to pay anything. That's false. I don't know. I don't quite know how they plan on winning this, but it is a very unique way of looking at things. I don't understand as I listen to more and more about what Clemson is trying to do, it doesn't make sense, especially when the ACC did the right thing on the filing. Like, hey, they knew about this. They took part in putting together the granted rights. They took part in upping the fees for leaving and being a part of this. They had votes and they voted all the way through. And now they're saying like, oh no, this is not what this contract was meant to be. When the ACC is like, listen, we were lockstep this whole way through until they weren't happy anymore.
Yeah.
So I don't know if Clemson is looking at this as we're going to approach a different way, or there's a strategy. Florida State's going to go at it this way. Clemson's going to go at it this way, and hoping that one of these two judges rule in their favor. Because if one of the judges rules in their favor, then it eliminates the granted rights, especially Clemson's. I don't think Clemson's lawsuit stands a chance because Clemson, the way Clemson has gone at their lawsuit, would send shockwaves through college football altogether. Because if a judge rules that what Clemson is trying to say, let's say a judge rules that's correct, guess what? The SEC's granted rights no longer applies. The Big Ten's granted rights no longer applies. Because if a judge rules that, yes, that's exactly what it says, then Ohio State can say, well, we can leave the Big Ten because our granted rights just gives you the rights to us as long as we're in the Big Ten. But we've decided to leave Michigan, Alabama. It opens up all kinds of issues. I don't know if a federal judge would sit down, look at what Clemson is trying to say, and look at the ramifications of, hey, we're going to rule in favor of Clemson, but the cascade effect that it will happen if they ruled in favor of Clemson, because it would make all granted rights contracts not enforceable. At least with the FCC, I mean, with Florida State, FSU. Florida State is saying, like, listen, yeah, we entered into this contract, but we didn't have all the information. We didn't realize that the old commissioner was really trying to take care of his son and trying to get his son a job. And he was more focused on what was best for his own personal side of things than what was best for the teams. And that's the reason why we need to be out of this contract. So if that's the case, a judge could rule in favor of Florida State and say, Florida State is correct. The ACC's granted right was not negotiated in good faith, and it's null and void, without it wreaking havoc on the ACC, the Big 12, the Big 10, and everywhere else. That's why I look at the Florida State one, who Florida State has been like the crazy family member
Yeah.
is actually, to me, this is my perception of the two lawsuits, actually has more valid reasons. I feel like Clemson is just saying like, nope, that's not the way it was. Even though we took part in negotiating, we took part in writing this, we voted for this, we knew what this was saying. They're saying, no, it doesn't say that. And I don't know how they're going to win it except for bogging the ACC down with agreements or hoping that they're going to get a very friendly judge in Pickens County. Also, Pickens County, is there a law in the South that every state in the South must have a Pickens County? There's Pickens County in South Carolina, in Georgia, and Alabama.
I didn't know there was one in Georgia.
And so I'm like, I don't know if it's like a state law that everybody has to have a Pickens County or something like that. I don't know. But but anyway, back to the main point. That's my take. I'm very curious to see what's going to happen with this. I don't see this lasting long. I see by the time football season kicks in, I think this is going to come to a head. I also think it was incredibly smart for the ACC to bring in Cal, Stanford, and SMU, because it keeps even if they lose Florida State and Clemson, they would still you have to have 15 in their contract, you have to have 15 teams. If I was the ACC, I would do a preemptive strike and I would reach out to Washington State and Oregon State and bring them into the ACC. They already have two former Pac-10, Pac-12 teams. They need travel partners anyway. I would bring Washington State and Oregon State in so that even if something crazy happens and they lose Florida State, they lose Clemson, and North Carolina and let's say North Carolina and Miami, they all go, that conference can still stay together, kind of like what the Big 12 has done. I think the smart thing is to do a preemptive strike and be prepared for what could happen. Don't be reactive, because right now I feel like they're being more reactive. Hey, Florida State is threatening to sue us, so we're going to take them to court. Oh, Clemson is suing us, so the next day we're going to sue them. They need to get ahead of this thing. They're going to, when this is all said and done, whether it's by a boatload of money Florida State and Clemson's going to pay, or a judge going to rule in their favor, they're losing 2 to 4 teams. They should replace those 2 to 4 teams now. They have 3. Go in, bring in Washington State and Oregon State, because you could easily have Florida State, Miami, Clemson, North Carolina, and maybe Virginia. Virginia's another team that everyone has been talking about that could fall right into the Big Ten. You would automatically have replacements for those guys. So it keeps you in a place of strength instead of being, kind of like the Pac-12, who was just trying to salvage the brand. So that's my overall take on that one.
Yeah, it seems like Clemson thought, since FSU is filing, then that means that we can try and get away with stuff as well in filing.
Well, I think when they agreed to the college football playoff money, that was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah.
That was the one where it was kind of like the ACC just rolled over and said, okay, SEC and the Big Ten are superior and we're a second tier organization. That's the way I looked at it as. And so we acknowledge that they are superior, and so they deserve more money, and we are lesser, so we deserve less money. That is the core problem that I think the ACC just created for themselves. I think the Big 12 kind of set in a situation where they're like, hey, we'll agree to this, but we want a clause in there so that if college realignment and things happen differently, we can go back and renegotiate this. And I think that was kind of like a coy but very smart move. Their approach is, we believe that the ACC is not long for this world. These guys are going to go, like I said, North Carolina, Virginia, Florida State, Clemson are going to go. And then we're going to gobble up the Pittsburghs, the Louisvilles, the Syracuses of the world, and maybe the Dukes and NC States of the world. And we're going to be a much larger conference. And then we're going to enact that clause so we can negotiate later to get more money. I felt like the Pac-12 was being smart. The Big Ten and SEC were being bullies. And the ACC is stuck in the middle. That's kind of the way I see it.
Yeah. Well,
does that make sense, though?
Yeah. I am sure that we will hear more about this, maybe even tomorrow or later next week. I'm sure that
let's just give us the rest of this week off, and let's see what happens. Let's let it marinate a little bit. The college football does not slow down.
No, it does not. Not even a little bit. All right, guys. Well, with that, we are going to take a quick little break. And when we come back, we're going to be talking about Conor McGregor says UFC return versus Michael Chandler is set for this summer. So make sure you guys stay around.